Jim Jones is done being disrespected. People are saying he just got attacked, pepper sprayed, and publicly humiliated at an airport in front of everybody. But hold up, because the real story is the complete opposite of what you think. This whole situation has the internet spinning because what looked like Jim getting embarrassed turned into his attackers getting dropped, bloodied, and carried off while he walked away like nothing happened. We're talking about a full-blown war zone erupting on an escalator at Fort Lauderdale Airport. Two men allegedly stalking him from the plane, plotting their move, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. And when they did, Jim Jones turned that escalator into a battlefield. One attacker left bleeding from the head, a 94-year-old bystander caught in the chaos and hospitalized, and somehow, Jim Jones faced 0 charges. Let me break this whole thing down because this story is wild. All right, so everybody thought they knew the full story about what happened with Jim Jones at that Florida airport. The headlines were screaming Jim Jones attacked, Jim Jones humiliated, Jim Jones pepper sprayed in public. That was the version everyone kept repeating online. People saw those words and automatically assumed Jim took an L, right? That he got caught slipping, embarrassed in front of crowds, maybe even punked. But now, new details, witness accounts, and that TMZ footage got the whole narrative twisting in a completely different direction. Because what actually went down wasn't Jim Jones getting humiliated, it was Jim Jones getting pushed to his absolute limit and responding with the kind of force that left his attackers worse off than they ever imagined. This wasn't a simple airport argument that got out of hand. This was a premeditated confrontation, a stalking situation, and an explosion of violence that turned a moving escalator into one of the most chaotic crime scenes airport security has probably ever witnessed. Now let's get into what actually happened, because TMZ just dropped footage that shows exactly how this whole thing unfolded, and it is insane. According to multiple witnesses and reports, this confrontation didn't start at the escalator. It started on the plane. Jim Jones was flying into Fort Lauderdale Hollywood International Airport, minding his business, when allegedly 2 men started acting confrontational with him during the flight. We're talking stares, whispers between themselves, maybe some words exchanged, the kind of energy that makes you know something's brewing before it pops off. But here's where it gets even crazier. These 2 dudes didn't just let it go after the plane landed. Insiders claimed they followed Jim from the plane into the terminal, watching his every move, waiting for the right moment. And where did they choose to strike? On the escalator. Think about that for a second. An escalator is a confined, moving space. You can't easily escape. You're trapped going in one direction with metal edges on both sides. It's literally one of the worst places to get into a physical confrontation, and these men knew that. The TMZ footage, and listen, this video is wild, shows the exact moment everything erupted. You can see Jim Jones on the escalator, and then bam! These 2 men launch themselves at him like they're trying to tackle him off the damn thing. We're not talking about a push or a shove. We're talking about full body aggression, fists flying, body slamming into the escalator rails. The whole scene looks like something out of an action movie, except this is real life in a public airport with families and travelers everywhere. Now, fans online turned into investigators the second this footage dropped. They started slowing down frames, zooming into faces, analyzing body language, comparing the injuries afterward, and what they found backs up exactly what witnesses were saying. Jim Jones was defending himself. Let me paint the full picture for you. The escalator is moving upward. Jim trying to get to the top. These 2 men come at him from different angles. One grabs him, the other swings. Jim has no choice but to fight back because he's literally cornered on a moving staircase with nowhere to go. He's not the aggressor here. He's reacting to being attacked. And here's the most shocking part of the footage. You can see one of the attackers stumbling back with blood pouring from his head. That's not a minor injury. That's the kind of damage that comes from serious impact. Whether it was from Jim's fist, the escalator rails, or hitting the ground, we don't know exactly. But what we do know is that this man ended up bleeding and visibly shaken, staggering like he just got rocked. But it doesn't stop there. In the middle of all this chaos, a 94-year-old bystander got caught in the crossfire. A 94-year-old. Someone's grandfather or great-grandfather just trying to travel through the airport, and he ends up pulled into this violent mess. Reports say he had to be taken to the hospital because of injuries sustained during the brawl. That's how out of control this situation got. Innocent people were getting hurt just from being in the wrong place at the wrong time. Now here's where online detectives really went to work. People started slowing down frames, zooming into faces, analyzing body language, comparing the injuries afterward, and what they found backs up exactly what witnesses were saying. Jim Jones was defending himself. But the most telling piece of evidence, the police reviewed all the footage from multiple angles, airport security cameras, bystander videos, the TMZ clip, and after seeing everything, they made a decision that shocked a lot of people. They didn't charge Jim Jones, not for assault, not for disorderly conduct, nothing. Because when they watched that footage, they didn't see Jim as the aggressor. They saw a man who was stalked, cornered, provoked, and forced to defend himself in a dangerous situation. Now, let's get into the motive, because this is where everything starts clicking and making sense. Why would two random men target Jim Jones specifically? What would make them follow him off a plane, stalk him through an airport, and then attack him on an escalator in front of hundreds of witnesses? First, let's talk about who Jim Jones is for anyone who might not be fully up on the Dipset history. Jim Jones is a Harlem legend. He's a rapper, a member of the Diplomats, and someone who's been in the industry for decades. He's known for his street credibility, his business moves, and the fact that he doesn't back down from confrontation. This is not someone you want to test, and most people in the culture know that. But here's the thing about being a public figure with that kind of reputation. You become a target. People want to test you. People want to prove something by getting at you. And in today's social media culture, attacking a celebrity can get you instant clout, whether you win or lose the fight. The video goes viral, your name gets out there, and suddenly you're the guy who ran up on Jim Jones. That kind of notoriety can be tempting for people who are desperate for attention. Now, insiders are claiming, and this is where it gets really interesting, that this confrontation may have been brewing long before the flight even took off. Some reports suggest these two men may have recognized Jim Jones during boarding, started whispering among themselves, and began acting confrontational from the jump. If that's true, that means this wasn't a random beef that popped off. This was planned. These dudes saw an opportunity and decided they were going to make a move. Think about the psychology of that for a second. You're on a plane with someone famous, someone with a reputation, and you decide, yeah, I'm going to confront this person in a public space where security and police are everywhere. That's not normal behavior. That's either extreme confidence, extreme stupidity, or something personal driving you to take that risk. And here's another angle that people online have been speculating about: jealousy and resentment. Jim Jones still lives well. He's still making moves in the industry, still respected in the streets, still has his platform and his money. Meanwhile, there are plenty of people who came up in the same era who fell off, who lost everything, who are struggling now. That kind of disparity can spark real envy. Seeing someone who's still winning while you're not can make people act irrationally. Put all that together and it starts looking like the perfect recipe for a confrontation. Two men, possibly motivated by clout chasing, jealousy, or some personal issue we don't even know about yet, decide to test Jim Jones in one of the most public and dangerous ways possible. But here's what they didn't account for. Jim Jones wasn't going to just take it. They thought they were going to punk him, embarrass him, maybe get a viral moment out of it. Instead, they got rocked, one ended up bleeding, and they both disappeared into silence after the fact, while Jim walked away and addressed his fans like nothing major even happened.
But here's the part that really hits different and honestly pisses me off the most. The one who got caught up in the middle of all this was a 94-year-old man. A 94-year-old. Let that sink in for a second. This man is somebody's grandfather, maybe even great-grandfather. He's lived nearly a full century, probably survived wars, lived through segregation, raised families, seen the world change in ways most of us can't even imagine. And now, in what should be a simple trip through an airport, he ends up hospitalized because two grown men decided to attack someone on an escalator. That's somebody who probably just wants to live their remaining years in peace. Maybe he was traveling to see family. Maybe he was heading home after visiting loved ones. Whatever the reason, he had nothing to do with whatever beef these men had with Jim Jones. And yet, he's the one who ends up hurt, shaken, and traumatized by an experience that should have never happened. The leaked footage and witness accounts describe pure terror in that moment. Imagine being 94 years old, standing on an escalator, and suddenly a violent brawl erupts right next to you. Bodies slamming into metal, fists flying, people screaming, blood on the ground. You can't move fast, you can't defend yourself, you can't escape because you're on a moving escalator. You just stuck there, caught in someone else's chaos, hoping you don't get hit in the crossfire. And unfortunately, he did get hurt. Reports say he had to be taken to the hospital for injuries sustained in the altercation. We don't know the full extent of what happened to him, whether he was pushed, fell, got struck accidentally, but the fact that a man that age ended up needing medical attention because of someone else's recklessness is absolutely messed up. This is what happens when people act without thinking about consequences. When you decide to attack someone in a crowded public space, you're not just putting that person at risk. You're endangering everyone around you. Families with children were in that airport. Elderly travelers were nearby. People just trying to get from point A to point B suddenly found themselves in the middle of a violent scene they had no part in creating. And let's keep it real. That 94-year-old man is dealing with trauma now that he shouldn't have to carry. Physical injuries heal, but the psychological impact of being caught in violence like that at such an advanced age, that can last. That can change how someone feels about traveling, about being in public, about their safety in the world. And for what? Because two men wanted to start a fight with the rapper over whatever petty reason they had? The whole situation is a reminder that violence never just affects the people directly involved. It ripples outward. It catches innocent people. It creates collateral damage that doesn't get talked about enough when these stories go viral. Everyone focuses on who won the fight, who got hurt worst, who's pressing charges, but that elderly man, he's probably just trying to recover and process what happened, with no apology, no accountability from the people who put him in that situation.
Now, here's where this story takes a turn that I think shocked a lot of people, especially those who assumed Jim Jones was going to catch charges from this. After police reviewed all the footage, and we're talking multiple camera angles from airport security, TMZ's clip, bystander videos, the whole nine, they made their decision. No charges for Jim Jones. None. Zero. After a violent brawl that left one man bleeding and a 94-year-old hospitalized, Jim walked away legally clear. Now, why would that be? Because when law enforcement watched that footage, they saw exactly what actually happened. They saw two men initiating the confrontation. They saw Jim Jones cornered on a moving escalator with no way to escape. They saw him defending himself against multiple attackers in a situation where his safety was legitimately threatened. This is textbook self-defense. When someone attacks you, especially when you're in a confined space with no clear exit, you have every legal right to protect yourself using reasonable force. And based on what the police saw, Jim's response was justified given the circumstances. Think about how rare that is. How often do we see these viral fight videos where everyone involved catches charges? Usually, even if you were defending yourself, you still end up dealing with legal consequences. Assault charges, disorderly conduct, something. But in this case, the evidence was so clear that police couldn't justify charging Jim. And let me tell you, Jim Jones' response afterward was cold. Like, the level of calm this man showed after going through something that chaotic was almost unsettling in how composed it was. Shortly after the incident, he addressed his fans directly. And his words were simple. "I'm all right. Give me a second. I'll be right with y'all." That's it. No long explanation, no dramatics, no playing victim, just a quick acknowledgement that something happened and he's good. Analyzing the response. That's the response of someone who's been through way worse situations than an airport brawl. That's someone who's not shaken, not scared, not even particularly bothered by what just went down. But then on social media, he doubled down with the message that sent the clear warning to anyone who might be thinking about testing him in the future. He posted, "They got what they were looking for." Let that sit. Read between those lines. Jim's basically saying, y'all came looking for a fight and you found one. You wanted smoke, you got smoke. And now look at the results. It's not a threat, it's a statement of fact. You wanted this confrontation, you initiated it, and now you're the ones bleeding and silent while I'm still standing and moving forward with my life. That kind of response does two things. First, it lets his fans know he's unbothered and unfazed. He's not going to be out here acting traumatized or scared. He handled his business and moved on. Second, it sends a message to anyone else who might be thinking about pulling a similar stunt. This is what happens. You're not going to punk Jim Jones and get away with it. You're not going to get your viral moment at his expense without consequences. And honestly, the internet ate that up. His fans came out in full support, flooding his comments with respect, saying he did what he had to do, praising him for defending himself. Even people who aren't necessarily fans of his music were giving him props for not backing down when he was attacked. Meanwhile, the attackers? Silent. Completely silent. No statements, no social media posts, no interviews. They disappeared from the public conversation entirely, which tells you everything you need to know about how that situation ended for them. If they had any justification, any angle where they could claim they were in the right, they would have spoken up. But they didn't, because they can't. The footage doesn't lie, and they know it.
Now, this whole situation gets even crazier when you really break down the logistics of what happened and how wild it is that this unfolded the way it did. Let's talk about the escalator as a location for a fight, because this is actually important. An escalator is one of the most dangerous places you could possibly have a physical confrontation. Here's why. First, it's moving. You're not on stable ground. Your balance is already compromised because the surface beneath you is actively shifting upward or downward. Any sudden movement, any impact, and you're at risk of falling in a way that can cause serious injury. Second, it's confined. You've got metal rails on both sides. You're in a narrow channel with limited room to maneuver. You can't sidestep. You can't create distance. You're locked into that space until you reach the top or bottom. Third, there are edges everywhere. The escalator steps themselves have metal edges. The handrails are hard surfaces. If someone falls or gets thrown against those edges, the potential for injury multiplies. And we saw that play out. One attacker ended up bleeding from the head, likely from impact with one of those hard surfaces. Fourth, other people are trapped with you. The crowd factor. This wasn't an empty escalator. There were other travelers on it, including that 94-year-old man. Once a fight breaks out, everyone in that space is suddenly in danger, and they can't easily escape without pushing through the violence or waiting until they reach the end. So when these two men chose to attack Jim Jones on that escalator, they weren't just making a bad decision, they were making a reckless, dangerous decision that put multiple lives at risk. And that's probably part of why police didn't charge Jim, because anyone reviewing that footage can see that he was put in an incredibly dangerous position through no fault of his own. Now let's talk about what allegedly happened before the escalator, because this context matters. According to insiders and witness reports, the tension started on the plane. Picture this. You're Jim Jones. You're on a flight, probably tired, just trying to get to your destination, and you notice two men acting weird. They're staring at you, they're whispering to each other and looking in your direction. Maybe they say something under their breath as they walk past your seat. The energy is off. You can feel it. Now, most people would probably chalk it up to fans recognizing you or maybe some haters being childish. You ignore it, right? That's reasonable. But then the plane lands, and as everyone's exiting, you notice these same two men are still watching you. They're not getting their bags and going their separate way. They're following you through the terminal. At what point does that go from annoying to threatening? At what point do you realize, okay, these dudes aren't just fans being weird, they're actually stalking me with intent. Some reports suggest that Jim may have been aware he was being followed, but was trying to handle it by just getting to his destination and avoiding confrontation. But these men weren't giving him that option. They were waiting for their moment, and they chose the escalator as the place to strike. Now here's what's particularly calculated about that choice. The escalator traps their target. Jim can't run. He can't easily de-escalate or walk away. He's locked into that moving space with them. It's the perfect ambush point if you're trying to corner someone who might otherwise be able to avoid confrontation.
But what they didn't account for was Jim's ability to actually fight back. That was their miscalculation. They probably assumed that surprise and numbers would be enough. 2 against 1, confined space, caught off guard, easy target, right? Wrong, because Jim Jones isn't someone who freezes in confrontation. He's someone who's been in street situations before, who knows how to handle himself, and who responded with the kind of force that left them worse off than him. And let's be real, the fact that one of them ended up bleeding from the head while Jim walked away relatively unscathed tells you who actually won that confrontation. This wasn't mutual combat where both sides took equal damage. This was an attack that backfired spectacularly on the attackers.
And this story is still unfolding with way bigger implications than just one incident at an airport. What we're seeing here is a dangerous trend in celebrity culture and social media behavior that needs to be talked about seriously. Let me break down what's really happening in the culture right now. We're in an era where confronting celebrities for clout has become almost normalized. People see someone famous in public, and instead of just respecting their space, they immediately think, how can I get a viral moment out of this? Sometimes it's harmless, asking for a photo, recording them from a distance, shouting their name, but increasingly we're seeing people escalate to physical confrontation, harassment, and even violence, all because they want to be the person who got at a celebrity. And social media feeds into this, because guess what happens when someone attacks a celebrity? The video goes viral, it gets millions of views, the attacker's name trends, they get interviewed by blogs, they gain followers, they get their 15 minutes of fame even if they lost the fight or caught charges. So now you've got people seeing that pattern and thinking, that could be me. If I run up on this rapper, this athlete, this influencer, I'll get attention. My name will be out there. People will know who I am. And they're willing to risk assault charges, physical harm, and legal consequences for that moment of internet notoriety. That's wild. And it's dangerous not just for the celebrities, but for everyone around them, as we saw with that 94-year-old bystander. The bigger conversation is about responsibility and consequences. When you constantly try to provoke celebrities, when you stalk them, when you initiate physical confrontations, you're not just testing someone or getting your respect. You're committing crimes. You're putting innocent people at risk. You're creating dangerous situations in public spaces where families and children are present. And for what? So you can say you fought Jim Jones? So you can get some views on social media? Is that really worth catching charges, getting hurt, being humiliated when the footage shows you got beat down? Jim Jones' situation is a wild example, but it's also a warning for anybody with a public platform. When you're out in public, you're a target. There are people out there who see you as an opportunity for clout, for violence, for testing their street credibility, and you have to move accordingly. That might mean extra security. That might mean avoiding certain places. That might mean being hyper aware of your surroundings at all times. But it's also a warning for the people doing the confronting. Just because someone is famous doesn't mean they won't defend themselves. Just because someone is a celebrity doesn't mean they're going to let you punk them. And when you attack someone, especially someone with Jim Jones's background and reputation, you better be prepared for the consequences. Because as Jim said, they got what they were looking for. The more you chase clout through violence, the more you risk ending up like these two attackers. Injured, silent, probably facing their own legal issues behind the scenes, and forever known as the dudes who tried to jump Jim Jones and failed. And let's talk about the airport as a location for this, because that adds another layer of how reckless this was. Airports are some of the most heavily monitored, security-conscious places in the world. There are cameras everywhere. TSA, police, security guards all over the place. You're in a space designed specifically to prevent exactly this kind of chaos. So the fact that these men decided to attack someone in an airport of all places shows a level of recklessness that's hard to comprehend. They had to know they'd be caught on camera. They had to know security would respond immediately. They had to know there was basically zero chance of getting away with this without consequences, and they did it anyway. That tells me this was pure impulse, clouded judgment from emotion, or they genuinely thought they'd be seen as heroes for confronting Jim Jones. None of those are good reasons, and all of them led to them ending up worse off than if they just left the man alone.
Now let's talk about how the community reacted to this, because the response online has been pretty unanimous, and it says a lot about how people view these kinds of situations. When the initial reports came out, before people saw the footage, there was some confusion. Headlines said Jim Jones attacked, and people weren't sure what to think. Some were concerned for him, some were making jokes, some were already blaming him without knowing the facts. But once that TMZ footage dropped, the narrative completely flipped. People saw with their own eyes that Jim was defending himself against two attackers. They saw him cornered on that escalator with nowhere to go. They saw one attacker bleeding, and suddenly the conversation changed from, did Jim mess up? To why would anyone be dumb enough to attack Jim Jones? His fans came out strong in support. Comments like, "That's my guy, he handled that, they tried the wrong one, Jim been about that life, what did they expect?" flooded his social media. People were praising him for not backing down, for defending himself, for handling his business like someone who's really from the streets and not just rapping about it. Even people who aren't necessarily Jim Jones fans were giving him respect. Because at the end of the day, most people understand self-defense. Most people understand that if you're attacked in a public place with no way out, you have every right to protect yourself. And then there was the other side of the conversation. People clowning the attackers. Like, the jokes were brutal. They thought they were going to get an easy win and ended up leaking. Imagine planning to jump someone and you're the one who ends up bloody. They really tried to attack Jim Jones and thought that was going to go well. The fact that one of them ended up bleeding while Jim walked away became a meme. People were making jokes about how they probably regret that decision now, how they're at home rewatching the footage, wishing they just asked for a photo instead, how they became a cautionary tale for anyone else thinking about trying something similar. And you know what? That public humiliation might actually be more effective than any legal consequences. Because now, these men are forever associated with losing a fight they started. Their names, if they even get revealed, will always come up in searches tied to Jim Jones' airport attack, where the story is about how they got beat down. That's the real consequence of chasing clout through violence. You might get your viral moment, but it might not be the kind of fame you wanted. Now, let's also talk about what this means for Jim Jones' reputation moving forward. In hip-hop culture, how you handle confrontation matters. Backing down or being seen as soft can damage your credibility. But responding to a threat with force, that reinforces the image that you're really about what you represent. Jim's handling of this situation, both the physical response and his calm demeanor afterward, actually strengthened his reputation. He showed he's not just talking on records. He showed he'll defend himself when necessary, and he showed he's not shaken by confrontation, which in the streets earns respect. But beyond the cultural credibility, there's a human element here that I think is worth acknowledging. Jim Jones is in his late 40s now. He's been in the industry for decades. He's got businesses, he's got a family, he's got things to lose. The fact that he still had to deal with being physically attacked in an airport in 2025 is honestly sad. Like, at what point should someone just be able to travel without worrying about being jumped by strangers?
Stay locked in because this story is still developing and there's more information dropping every day. We still don't know the full identities of the attackers. We still don't know if they're facing any charges for the assault or for the injuries to that 94-year-old bystander. We don't know if there's going to be civil lawsuits, if more footage is going to surface, or if anyone else is going to come forward with additional details about what happened on that plane. And honestly, knowing how these situations usually play out, there's probably going to be more twists. Someone's going to give an interview. More camera angles might leak. We might find out there was pre-existing beef we didn't know about. The attackers might eventually break their silence and try to spin their own version of events. So if you want to stay updated on everything as it unfolds, make sure you hit that subscribe button right now. Turn on notifications so you don't miss a single update because I'm covering every detail, every new piece of footage, every statement that comes out about this situation. But before you do that, I want to hear from you in the comments. Drop your thoughts on this entire situation because I know y'all got opinions. First question, do you think Jim Jones handled this the right way? Should he have tried to de-escalate before it got physical, or was he completely justified in defending himself the way he did? Let me know in the comments. Second question, what do you think should happen to the attackers? Should they face criminal charges even though Jim didn't get charged? What about accountability for the 94-year-old man's injuries? Third question, do you think this clout-chasing culture is going to get worse, or do stories like this actually deter people from trying similar stunts? And finally, if you were in Jim Jones' position, cornered on an escalator by two people attacking you, how would you have handled it? I really want to know what y'all think, so don't hold back in the comments. Let's get a real conversation going. And yo, if you found this breakdown valuable, if you learned something new about the situation, or if you just appreciate the deep dive into what actually happened versus what the headline said, do me a favor and hit that like button right now. It helps the video reach more people, and it lets me know y'all are rocking with the content so I can keep bringing you these in-depth analyses. Also, share this video with anyone who was confused about what happened with Jim Jones. I've seen so much misinformation circulating, so many people still thinking Jim got humiliated when the complete opposite happened. Help me get the real story out there by sharing this breakdown. Now, before I let you go, let me just say this. This Jim Jones situation is a perfect example of why we need to stop believing headlines before we see evidence. The initial narrative was completely wrong. If people that just run with those early reports without watching the footage, Jim's reputation could have been damaged for no reason. Always wait for the full story. Always look at the evidence. And always remember that there are multiple sides to every situation. But the truth usually comes out when you actually examine what happened instead of just reacting to headlines. This situation also reminds us that celebrities are human beings who have the right to defend themselves just like anyone else. They're not punching bags for your clout chasing. They're not NPCs in your quest for viral moments. They're people who will respond when threatened, and sometimes that response will leave you worse off than them. And for anyone watching this who's ever thought about approaching a celebrity in an aggressive way, don't. Just don't do it. It's not worth the legal trouble, the physical danger, or the public humiliation when footage of you getting beat down goes viral. Get your clout the right way. Create something, build something, contribute something positive to the world instead of trying to tear someone else down. I appreciate every single one of you for watching this all the way through. These deep dives take time to put together, and the fact that you stuck around to the end means a lot. You're part of a community that values real information over clickbait, context over headlines, and truth over rumors. Stay safe out there, and remember, not everyone you see in public is an opportunity for a viral moment. Sometimes the smartest thing you can do is mind your business, show respect, and keep it moving. Because testing the wrong person can have consequences you're not prepared for. And unlike Jim Jones, you might be the one who ends up humiliated, injured, and regretting your choices. I'll see you in the next one. Stay locked in, stay smart, and keep watching because this story ain't over yet. Peace.